for the hardest-hitting show in talk radio. The true progressive voice since 2012. This is Southpaws.
And welcome to Southpaws on the Pacifica Radio Network. We are the leaders of the revolution. My name is Darren Gibson. I'm your co-host.
My name is Jack Prince, your fellow co-host.
Jack, we've got quite a few topics. We're going to talk about the Ukraine invasion by Russia. We've got some economic stuff that we want to talk about today. Plenty of stuff. Also, we have the protest that took place in Florida last week. Some students protesting the Don't Say Gay legislation that Florida's legislature is trying to pass. And I guess they have. I don't know what the latest is on that. We'll talk about that in just a minute, though. Before we get started, a couple of reminders. You can follow us on social media by going to facebook.com/Southpaws Radio Show. You can follow us on Twitter at Southpaws Radio. You can follow us on Tumblr at southpawsradioshow.tumblr.com. You can follow us on YouTube by doing a search for Southpaws Radio. You can become a patron of the show by going to patreon.com/Southpaws Radio. You can listen to the show anytime at Spreaker, Stitcher, Apple Podcasts, or Reason.fm by doing a search for Southpaws. Once you found our logo, you found us. We send links to our weekly episodes to our Facebook, Twitter, Tumblr, and YouTube accounts. You can listen to us on Global Community Radio Channel 1 every Saturday night at 11 Eastern, and you can listen to us on great Pacifica stations including KCEI in Taos, New Mexico, KZGM in Kabul, Missouri, and KEPJ in San Antonio, Texas. So be sure to listen to us there as well. Let's go ahead with our quote of the week, which we haven't done in a long time. This is actor Alan Alda, who, by the way, has a great podcast. If you haven't listened to it, I encourage you to do so. Here's the quote of the week from Alan Alda. Be brave enough to live creatively. The creative is the place where no one else has ever been. You have to leave the city of your comfort and go into the wilderness of your intuition. You can't get there by bus, only by hard work, risking, and by not quite knowing what you're doing. What you'll discover will be wonderful. Yourself. And that really hit home with me for some reason.
Yeah, there's nothing that's ever been accomplished by continuing down the roads of conventionality. With political thought, art, you name it. Yeah. It's always been a break that gets you freedom. Yeah. From conventional thinking.
Yes, exactly. And real quick, I also want to mention, we haven't talked about our listener appreciation party. That is coming up for our local listeners in Grand Rapids, and actually anybody that wants to come to Grand Rapids, that party is Saturday, May 21st, 2022. It is private invite only, so if you want to be invited, you need to reach out to us either on Facebook or by email at southpawsradio@gmail.com, or you can call the offices of Big D Entertainment. The number here is 616-723-6635. So if you want to come to the party, and we really encourage it, you need to get invited. By the way, we are requiring proof of COVID vaccines, and you must wear a mask in the building at all times. So that is for your safety and our safety. We're going to have some guest panelists, and we're going to have some musical entertainment. A former guest of ours is a really, really good vocalist, and she just dropped her first track from her first album just a couple of weeks ago. Her first album comes out in May. So Rissa Jade will be joining us and performing, doing some singing and hanging out with us as well. So make sure you check her out. You can find her single on the Apple Store, and that's where you'll find her album. Plus anywhere online that you can order her album. All right, let's get into what we've got going on. Ukraine, the situation continues to deteriorate there. Just when you think that Russia couldn't get any more sinister, they take over a hospital and use the doctors and patients as human shields against the Ukrainian army. This is disgusting.
Well, the horror stories were actually contained in a short video that was played in the halls of Congress just hours ago. And I don't know if anybody's ever seen that in its entirety. But if you don't tear up, you're part of the problem. I'm going to tell you. It's incredible, some of the scenes. Mm-hmm. And what really strikes me at this point is that Americans don't always get into the geopolitical nuances and proclivities, but they understand seeing children abandoned, 9 children, 10 children that are abandoned that were all surrogate babies, and the pictures of empty carriages representing the merit of children that have been killed. That's where I would think in the hearts of Americans and in the families there'd be a stirring right now. There'd be a stirring to say you can't let them lose, and you can't let them keep dropping bombs from the dark sky. You can't do that. There are missile systems, there are systems of radar that can take out the missiles that are being launched, and there are ways to stop the high altitude bombings, and those have to be implemented. There can't be any more hesitation. And I don't know. I see a whole nation enthralled and motivated to cheer for their team. And my God, Americans love to cheer for the underdog team in the NCAA tournament. It's tradition. Mm-hmm. But where is an equal stirring? There are protests. It needs to come to a climax and move on our government. These are my opinions, and these aren't necessarily conservative or liberal, that there needs to be a effort to completely win this war now. Don't just supply them aid. Take this on your shoulders, America. It must be won. The war must be won in the Ukraine. That's all there is to it. You have to remove the fears of what could happen, domino theories. All of that must be stopped, and you say whatever the cost, whatever the threat, whatever the risk, that it has to be won at this point. Or you're going to see a month-by-month long eradication of civilian areas until the nation is at its knees. And then Russia is just one step closer to the heartlands that they've wanted all along. So I guess we have to say win now, not just help, but win.
Exactly. And I know that we're on Pacifica Radio, and the big gist of the network is pacification. No war, got to be pacifist. Well, there already is a war.
Yep.
And the only way that you stop dictatorial strongmen is with violence. I'm sorry. Not sorry. That's how it is. That's how it's been in the history of mankind. As Popper says, you cannot tolerate intolerance, because intolerance will take over. And the only way you get control back is through violence. And that is not only legal, but ethical under Popper's paradox of tolerance.
Yeah, Russia doesn't have to win another inch of ground. They can sit where they're at. Bombs are already reaching any area of Kyiv, the capital. Mm-hmm. So it's just a matter of time.
And now
it's just a matter of time.
And now they're starting to bomb Lviv now, which was considered a sanctuary. Not anymore.
Yeah.
Where's it going to stop? Where are they going to stop? I shouldn't say they. I should say Putin. Because it isn't the Russian people that want this. They've been brainwashed by government-owned media. By the way, did you happen to see the producer at Channel 1 in Russia stand up behind the anchor and unfurl a big poster board that said "No war"? The government's been lying to you.
Listen, those kinds of acts of heroism, need to motivate, energize us here in this country. I thought that's what we thrived on. My God, go look at the list of movies in any one year. There's some leader that stands up and motivates his troops or his team or whatever for what's right. Those are the kind of values I thought we really believed in. And what did you see? Not just Zelensky's speech, but the comments from a conservative, ex-conservative Arnold Schwarzenegger, who, by the way, is one of only 22 people that Putin is connected to on the internet.
Really?
And he has been for years. Yeah.
Wow.
Exactly.
That's surprising. Yeah, when Arnold Schwarzenegger is saying, Putin, you need to back down, Russian people, you need to stand up, that's saying something.
Listen, what was Churchill's speech? What was Martin Luther King's speech? Painted with bravery, right? Mm-hmm. That moved the whole country of England under bombardment, very similar. And you realize that Zelensky borrowed from the same phrasing that Churchill used. And he took parts of King's speech. Mm-hmm. Yeah, even just one that I remember sitting here, I got this written down, is I Have a Dream. And he talked about 1941 when we were attacked at a much smaller scale, a lot farther away from home, but how it brought just an anger and a resolve down from Hawaii. And it's put together with a backdrop that he could be killed at any time. He had tickets. He could have been out of there.
Yeah. He could have, but you know what he's doing? He's staying. He's fighting. He's motivating his people. He's motivating his
people, and he's trying to motivate Biden. So you're not just leader of the United States. You're the leader of the world, pal.
Yeah, it's not like Cadet Bone Spur sitting down at Mar-a-Lago who got out of military service in Vietnam because I got bone spurs. Yeah, that man lies so much, I wouldn't trust anything he said if his tongue was notarized. I've said that before on the show. So, yeah, all you Putin-loving conservatives, and there's a whole bunch of you out there because all you follow is Trump and you listen and you regurgitate what he says, you folks are the traitors. Evil, violent, conservative savages.
Treasonous.
Yep.
Yes, indeed.
Unbelievable. And you've mentioned speeches by Churchill and Martin Luther King. We got to mention FDR. The only thing we have to fear is fear itself.
Yeah.
You know? And we're going to play a bit of a FDR speech right now. One of the things that's been tied in with what's happening in Ukraine and Russia is gas prices. That's the excuse that's being given by the corporate-owned mainstream media, by the oligarchs, by everybody. Let's tell you the truth, just like we did last week. Your gas prices are going up not because of Biden, not because of Putin, not because we have stopped Russian imports of oil, which only equates to 3% of what we import. Like we said last week, out of a 10-gallon tank of gas, 0.3 of a gallon is Russian. So that's not it. We're not hurting because of the embargo against Russian oil. The reason gas prices have gone up while the price of oil per barrel has been dropping is plain and simple corporate greed. Nothing else. It's not embargoes. It's not Biden. It is the greed of the oil companies that are making record profits and buying back their stock. Period. End of story.
Yeah, the greed that has always been there. And if you hadn't seen it up till this crisis, to this fake excuse for a gas price, if you haven't seen from the corporate world, you've really been unconscious. Mm-hmm. And we can talk about quiet enemies. This enemy has United States economically over a barrel. I mean, there's people who aren't eating because they got to get to work. They're paying $4 a gallon for gas.
Yeah.
And it all boils down to huge profits on top of already huge profits in the last 2 quarters and through COVID that the oil companies made. Remember, what they do is, if there's an influx of oil, if there's any excess of oil, they stop producing it.
Mm-hmm.
They stop making it so that they always have you over a barrel.
Yeah.
Not to be simplistic, but that's how they work it.
And that barrel is filled with oil.
Yeah.
You know, I'm going to mention this. This was mentioned in the news a couple of days ago. 1 day's worth of minimum wage work will not fill a gas tank. Let me repeat.
Just 1 day?
1 day. So if you work an 8-hour day for minimum wage in this country, which the minimum wage is $7.25 an hour, that's $58. You will not be able to fill your tank with $58. That's before taxes, folks. That's before it all. You know, this is ridiculous. And I'm going to mention a dear friend of ours who we keep begging to get on the show, KJ Millo. She's been a guest host on this show before. She mentioned to me on Thursday, she said it's no longer minimum wage when you can't afford a 1-bedroom apartment, and it's because you can't afford rent anywhere. And I actually had this conversation on Thursday as well. You're not going to believe this, Jack. My Trump-loving older brother actually came over, and we've kind of buried the hatchet for the time being until he starts his racist crap again.
In his forehead or someplace else?
Yeah. By the way, I should mention my mom has a history with hatchets, so I'll have to tell that story at the party. So there's a reason to go. You can find out why my mom chopped up a bed once. And I'm not lying either.
I got to hear that one, yeah.
Yeah, don't mess with Kentucky women who are angry. But he was complaining yesterday. A guy that he used to work with at the U.S. Postal Service was looking to rent an apartment somewhere in Grand Rapids. You want to know how much they wanted for a simple 1-bedroom apartment? With shared laundry, by the way. You didn't have your own laundry in the apartment. You had to share it with others. There was a separate room. You want to know how much you want?
I'm going to guess around $1,000.
Over. Try $1,400 a month.
Unbelievable.
We've talked before on this show. West side of Grand Rapids, the average rent's $1,200 a month. And here's the bizarre part about it. My niece lives in Hudsonville, which is just outside of Grand Rapids. Right. She has a 2-bedroom apartment. The 1-bedroom has a walk-in closet. She has a dishwasher. She has her own laundry in the apartment, and she's paying a lot less, like $850 a month. But try to find a house in Hudsonville, and you can't do it because it's so expensive. It's expensive to live. And again, it's because of the rich. You know, and
that's all there is to it.
Yeah. So KJ Millo on Thursday says minimum wage, that is meant to let someone earn the minimum amount to support themselves, rent, eat, medical. It's no longer that. It's basically corporate theft. And she's right about it. You know who else was right about it? We're going to play this clip, folks. This goes back to, I believe, 1943 or 4. This is President Franklin Delano Roosevelt, the second Bill of Rights speech. We have never played this on the show before. Take a good listen, folks. Here is the reality of the situation today.
In our day, certain economic proofs have become accepted as self-evident. A second Bill of Rights, under which a new basis of security and prosperity can be established for all, regardless of station or race or creed. Among these are the right to a useful and remunerative job, the right to earn enough to provide adequate food and clothing and recreation, the right of every farmer to raise and sell his products at a return which will give him and his family a decent living, the right of every businessman, large and small, to trade in an atmosphere of freedom, freedom from unfair competition and domination by monopolies at home or abroad, the right of every family to a decent home, the right to adequate medical care, and the opportunity to achieve and enjoy good health, the right to adequate protection from the economic fears of old age, sickness, accident, and unemployment, the right to a good education. All of these rights spell security. And after this war is won, we must be prepared to move forward in the implementation of these rights to new goals of human happiness and well-being. For unless there is security here at home, there cannot be lasting peace in the world.
He's right. FDR was right in the 40s. And we're
yes, he was right. Yeah.
It's scary.
You know, we mentioned speeches by Martin Luther King. One of his most poignant comments in my memory was that poverty is the worst kind of violence. And
right.
People don't see it as violence.
No, they sure don't. They see everything else as violence. Destruction of property is violence in the eyes of most people. Let me once again spell that out for you. Property damage is not violence. It never has been. The oligarchs want you to believe that it is so that they can sick the cops on you and they can beat you over the head or tase you or put their knee on their neck and choke you out and so you die. But it's not violence, folks. Oh.
Violence is the child that hears mom and dad remonstrating over the lack of being able to meet their bills.
Yes.
And seeing the toll on the family. And you can extrapolate that as far as you want to. That kind of quiet violence doesn't make the news. It stems from poverty.
And if it does hit the news, it's only for a 30-second
sensation.
Blurb. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And one of the things we've been seeing is there's been some efforts to unionize. And I want to go into this story real quick, Jack. Our friend Jeff Smith at grid.org, GRIID.org, he has this story. This is dated March 15th. We're talking about Starbucks and Starbucks workers trying to organize unions all across the country. Well, the effort has returned to Grand Rapids, Michigan. Why do I say returned? Because this isn't the first time. Let's get into the story here. On Thursday, March 24th, workers at the Starbucks at Burton and Rosemont Southeast in Grand Rapids are asking for ally support in their attempt to form a union. There have been 6 newly formed unions at Starbucks across the country, with another 120 locations in the process of fighting for a union. Those fighting to make the Burton and Rosemont Starbucks a unionized workplace are asking the following. Order your coffee with one of these phrases, plus your name. Union yes, union strong, or solidarity. Sign the letter at the Starbucks to show your support and spread the word in the GR community. Each of these ways of showing support are easy and risk-free. However, if it means the workers at this Starbucks location will be able to form a union, then we should all find ways to participate. In addition, if this Starbucks location forms a union, then it will be easier for workers at every Starbucks location where workers want the right to collectively bargain. A brief history of Starbucks unionizing efforts in Grand Rapids. It goes, so this isn't the first time. In June of 2008, Media Mouse, which was an indie media blog, they're no longer in existence. And Jeff was part of that. They posted a story about a Starbucks barista who was fired for attempting to organize a union. Here's what Media Mouse reported back in June of 2008. Starbucks terminated a barista active in the IWW Starbucks Workers Union today as part of its ongoing effort to combat a growing movement of employees pushing for a living wage and secure work hours. The barista, Cole Dorsey, was fired after 2 years of service while he was coordinating a union recruitment drive at the Starbucks stores in Grand Rapids. Starbucks' pretext for the illegal anti-union firing was that Dorsey was guilty of some months-old attendance infractions. Dorsey said, quote, Today, I join the growing number of baristas the Starbucks has fired in its relentless union-busting campaign. Starbucks' disrespect for the right to join a union is appalling and absolutely will not stop our efforts to have a voice at work. End of quote. The firing comes as a National Labor Relations Board judge is set to rule after a lengthy trial on the retaliatory terminations of 3 New York City baristas. Even before the firing, the NLRB was investigating whether Starbucks violated a settlement agreement entered into in Grand Rapids over anti-union discrimination. In 2006, Starbucks was forced to rehire 2 union baristas who had been unlawfully fired for union activity. The latest firing in Grand Rapids signals that reinstalled CEO Howard Schultz will not modify the company's practice of terminating outspoken union baristas to intimidate workers from joining up. 1 month after IWW labor organizer Cole Dorsey was fired from Starbucks, the local IWW chapter organized a protest at a Starbucks location on 28th Street and the East Beltline. The IWW sent out the following message. Quote, union members and social activists are gearing up for what may be the largest global coordinated action against Starbucks ever. Protesters will decry what they see as an epidemic of anti-union terminations by the world's largest coffee chain. Starbucks and its CEO Howard Schultz have exhibited a pattern of firing outspoken union baristas ever since the advent of the IWW Starbucks Workers Union in 2004 and are demonstrating the same practice against the CNT union in Spain. On July 5th, people around the world will show Starbucks that we baristas, along with other supporters, will have a voice, and Starbucks' discrimination and repression of our efforts will not go unchecked. End of quote. By the way, that is directly from Cole Dorsey back in 2008. In November of 2008, Starbucks was taken to court by the IWW worker for being fired. The National Labor Relations Board provided a lawyer to fight for the fired Starbucks employee. Starbucks hired, guess who? Varnum, Rittering, Schmidt, and Howlett, based in downtown Grand Rapids, the big glass skyscraper on Bridge Street.
Yep.
Then in July of 2009, while awaiting a ruling on the case, the Grand Rapids chapter of the IWW organized another demonstration outside the Starbucks in East Grand Rapids on Wealthy Street. So, yeah, there's that, folks. So this is a long-time effort by Starbucks to not unionize.
Yeah, you know, when I was at the famous now G20 protest in Toronto a number of years ago, and there were anarchists from all over Canada there, but they made a march to the big center that's, I don't know, a skyscraper, and that's where all the countries are holed up. And one thing that was really telltale, every single Starbucks, there'd be family grocery stores, there'd be other that were left untouched. But a Starbucks would be totally destroyed. I mean, they would break the windows, they'd go and they'd burn. This was the anarchists from Canada, in the United States. That was their number one target, was Starbucks. And at the time, I marveled. Now, that wasn't their only target. But any large chain, any corporate chain, that was within their sights. But especially Starbucks. They have a history of egregious union busting, and they thrive off of that. They are heading the charge. So I applaud Jeff again for tracking them down, exposing them.
Yes. And Jeff does just a fantastic job of this.
Unparalleled. Yep, exactly.
Yeah. And actually, I want to get to this a little bit here. And this is a story, again, our good friend KJ Millo posted this or sent this to me, actually. It's an article from Business Insider, and the headline reads, if you're not making $14.50 an hour, you probably can't afford to live in any U.S. county. And you know what? I think that it's even to the point you can't live on $14.50 an hour anywhere. I don't know. I've seen so many people, Jack, it's disgusting, living in their cars. I've seen at least 2 people where they've got pretty much their entire life piled up in their car, and they're living in it, parking wherever they can just to survive.
Yeah. You can't go to Myers and not pass a couple cars on your way in when you park.
And I mean,
that.
And that's not even to talk about the homeless. I mean, they're homeless too, but they at least have a shelter, their car, because there's people in downtown Grand Rapids that have no shelter. They have to go to like Mel Trotter or one of the other shelters. Yeah, I tell you what, we will post a link to that article on our official Facebook page. So if you go to facebook.com/Southpaws Radio Show, we will post a link to that Business Insider article. It's a great read. You really have to take a look at it.
Yeah, you talk about people making residence in their cars, automobiles. There are places out west where there's called free camping. And if you get a little tape recorder and walk down and ask the people, well, you're not on vacation. You've been here for months, right? Yeah, oh yeah. Mm-hmm. Why? How? Well, I was a college grad and I had this job and was making house payments and this happened and then this sickness came or whatever obstacle came. And, these aren't the proverbial hobos. These are people who've been dislodged. And now there's a whole culture of nomads that wander this country from one free campground. Now, and what's ironic, we were going to reservations where the indigenous people of this country live on the edge and have for generations to try and help them. And we're passing Americans in similar situations to get to the reservations. And interestingly enough, guess where the largest free camping areas are? On reservations. As the Native Americans have opened up their territories now for the Caucasians, the very offspring of the people who hunted them down and tried to annihilate them in genocide, they're giving them refuge and space because they can't live in economic horror out there prompted by the corporate world.
And put them on reservations, by the way.
Yeah, I mean, look how it's full circle.
Yeah. Isn't it funny how things just seem to work out that way?
Yeah. But it's not that far. You get on the highway, take I-90, go to the Badlands, and you'll see them. You'll see these travel trailers. You'll see people in vans.
Wow.
That's home now. And they can't afford the $15, $20 hookup at a regular campground.
No.
In our country, in the heartland of our country.
I know. It's terrifying. What do we do? I've got the solution. Eat the rich. It's that simple. It really is that simple.
They've been consuming us.
Yeah.
Forever.
Yeah. They've been
every ounce of suffering translates into $1 for these guys.
We talk about how we have rated the natural resources of various countries around the world. One natural resource that we hardly ever discuss, and it's one that we really need to start calling a natural resource, is our labor. The labor of us. Not the rich, us. We're making the money for them.
It doesn't work without that. It never has.
No.
And I see these boats being confiscated now by the United States because they're realizing.
I love it.
Now, just add this all together. Let's just slow right down and add these numbers together. The United States realizes that the political impact of the billionaires, the oligarchs in Russia is counterproductive, right? To the peace of the world. I mean, you're attacking. The United States government doesn't see them in our country, but they certainly realize the impact of these billionaires over there, right? And they've confiscated their boats. Can you think of anything we might confiscate and boil down to feed the middle class, to help the middle class sitting right here? Putin's boat alone was 500 and some feet long. That's like a football field and another 100 feet. Think of it.
Yeah.
And hundreds of millions of dollars. And these boats are just floating around the world, and they're killing people. They might as well have munitions on the deck, because you can simply follow their repression from their greed and how it boils down to heartache, misery, suffering, and death. And somehow we were able to figure out, well, hell, just confiscate their boats. There's an idea. Again, make a list. Be creative. You talked about in your opening quote the beauty of living creatively. Create a list of places and goods, buildings, launches that we could confiscate. Think of it. We could confiscate and melt the money down and reduce that unlivable rent.
Mm-hmm. It's funny you mentioned that. There was a story earlier this week. I don't know if you saw it on Inside Edition, Jack, but apparently you've heard of Billionaires Row in New York City, correct?
Yeah.
Well, some of those big luxury mansions in New York, which are really floors of apartment buildings, some of them are owned by Russian oligarchs. And apparently a few of them are very quietly listing their properties because they're afraid they're going to get seized. So they're going to sell the property, take the money, and run. In the words
they're mingled
of
right
Steve
amongst us.
Miller.
I bet you could checkerboard, you could hopscotch or jump from some of the high homeowners in these large corporations right here in Grand Rapids. You talked about what it costs to get an apartment, a one-bedroom apartment. Well, who owns that company? Was that a family that's running it? No, for the most part, the highest percentage of these are land companies. Some of them not even from Michigan. Most of them not from Michigan. I get in my mailbox cards. Hey, you want to sell your property? And I called them one time. Where are you from? It turns out they're from California.
Mm-hmm.
So I just wish that people would see the disastrous impact of billionaires anywhere. I don't care what flag is flying on their yacht.
Yeah. The billionaires need to start swimming in the ocean. You want to go back and forth? Go swim.
Yeah.
Surrender your yachts or we're going to seize them. And that's it. Done. Over.
America, wake up, get out of bed, look down at your leg, and realize there's been a leech behind your knee sucking your lifeblood, and your parents before you. They've been there forever. Yeah. We're talking about an educational renaissance and wake up, right? We're talking about the inspiration but BLM has put into the minds of students and educators to teach real history, and you had the 619 Project. And you got the CRT issue floating out there. Let's have a renaissance, a wake-up of understanding that we have had blood-sucking corporate greed structured systemically that's been killing us for decades. If we're going to wake up halfway, get all the way out of the bed and go after them. And eating them may sound somewhat extreme, but there have been renaissances. I point to Paris, the one there, where they did literally go out, drag them out of their houses. If you were a billionaire, you had a price on your head.
Yeah.
We talk about the extremism of John Brown. John Brown said, hey, this is racism. When you have a mother and a father separated at this plantation for economic reasons down in Mississippi, Alabama, et cetera, it's got to end right now. To the degree that he would go into the plantations and hang the plantation owners. Mm-hmm. Now, he was considered crazy, but without his craziness, we wouldn't have had the Civil War. Well, without some acts that are, do I dare say, flamboyant against the rich, America will never wake up.
Yep.
No organization.
Yep.
Jeff preaches the truth week in and week out. Mm-hmm. And the organizational response from the public and from the people that look at those, if they even look at those articles, is not commensurate to the degree of the problem.
Exactly. Folks, Jack said it. It's time to wake up. The alarm's ringing. The coffee's brewing. Time to wake up. And speaking of waking up, some students have done that in Florida, and I want to get to this story again. Jeff Smith was responsible for publicizing this story here. I'm going to do this a little bit different, Jack. I'm going to start with what the local media reported, and then we'll get to what Jeff Smith posted. So this first story is Amanda Batchelor writing for WPLG Television. This is out of Davie, Florida. And it's dated March 12th.
Know it well.
What was supposed to be a peaceful protest Friday turned violent at a high school in Davie, and that was Friday, March 11th when this happened. A student sent Local 10 News cell phone video of a fight breaking out in the parking lot of Western High School. We're told it happened while students were staging a walkout Friday afternoon in protest of the recent passage of the so-called Don't Say Gay bill in Tallahassee. Republican sponsors say the Parental Rights in Education bill is about helping parents control what their children do and learn about in school. Critics have dubbed it the Don't Say Gay bill because of its language in a particular paragraph, which specifies sexual and gender identity may not be in lessons in K through third grades. In a statement, the school district said, quote, Western High School supports the diversity of its students and their rights to make their voices heard. The district is aware that some students planned a peaceful student-led protest regarding recent actions in Tallahassee for what's referred to as the Don't Say Gay bill. Students behaving in a manner that does not comply with the Code of Student Conduct may receive disciplinary consequences. End of quote. The Davie Police Department says no arrests have been made in connection with the fight. What led to the incident remains unclear. Well, we know the truth. We know what led to the incident happening, the fight happening.
Yep.
We have this report from the website itsgoingdown.org. This was posted by the Florida Youth Liberation Front. This timeline of events during the Western High School walkout of March 11th comes from the direct testimony of several students and YLF affiliates present, coupled with video and photo evidence included in the article. It is first necessary to provide some background. Western High School is located in Davie, one of the most white schools in Broward County and certainly almost all of South Florida as well. It is also a high concentration, therefore, of more right-wing and pro-Trump elements in an otherwise solidly Democratic area. So here's the timeline. Students had organized a walkout at Western to occur in the parking lot. This organization was entirely independent of any club, even Western High's Gender Sexuality Alliance, which stated in an Instagram story that they were not going to endorse the event under any circumstances. The walkout had begun to gather peacefully in the parking lot, and given its organic organization had far more enthusiasm than Cypress Bay's walkout 2 days prior. Promptly, a group of white, assumably straight boys got on top of a pickup truck holding a Trump 2020 flag and chanting, "F*** Joe Biden." They then began to throw projectiles at the crowd of walkout participants, and Western High being a supermajority white school, many people began to switch over to their side. What followed next was a series of savage attacks by the crowd of right-wingers against the walkout. Rocks were thrown at the walkout participants, and the roaming horde of fascists in training flipped over tables and threw trash cans on the ground while engaging in fistfights with protesters, many of whom fought back effectively and bloodied at least one right-winger, which, by the way, good for them. When you see a fascist, you punch the fascist in the face. Always punch a fascist in the face.
Yep.
Back to the story. It did not end there. The crowd of right-wingers eventually pushed through the crowd, cornering a walkout participant on the second-floor balcony who jumped off and broke his leg as a result. The pro-LGBT plus crowd reconsolidated itself, taking out several pride flags with an immediate response by police who arrived and confiscated the flags, but left the pro-Trump rioters unscathed. Isn't that a big shock there?
Symptomatic, yeah. That's the way they do it.
Yep. Police then kettled the protest. And by the way, what do we mean by kettled? Is where they surround the crowd and then push them toward a certain direction so that they can have control over the situation. The police pushed the crowd back inside before school ended. The school then sent out a subsequent email talking about walkout participants starting fights with little to no mention of fascist attacks and provocations. Many students present reported chants of gays and white power coming from the crowd waving a Trump 2020 flag, but these concerns have not been acted on by the school. Again, Is that a big shock or not? Many people.
Well, the principal superintendent needs to take a stand, make a statement. It won't happen.
Yep.
Because they're afraid of the white guy that owns the orange groves, the Trump supporter that's in the district. I know that town. Me and my father, I lived in Fort Lauderdale. We would go directly west to Fort Lauderdale, out into Davie. At that time, it was just orange groves. And there were abandoned orange groves that you could go and pick oranges for free. And that's where we'd go, and we'd get a bunch of oranges. But it's redneck territory, total redneck territory. But that's symptomatic of the entire country right now. These Trump savages, as you just pointed out, get away. The police turn their head on their violence. Allow it to happen.
Because guess what? They're on the same side as the evil, violent, conservative savages.
You're damn right. They go home and they tell their son about it. He goes to school and heightens the violence against the gays. My granddaughter was in a school in Florida. Now she's in Washington, D.C. But it was totally, horrifically right-wing conservative, bullies, anti-gay. Now, right now, we have a country that you can't say gay. You can't say racism. You can't quote history. You can't talk about the Civil War. You can't talk about the unmitigated truth that the slavery started in this nation in 1619. You can't state that fact. You got to be kumbaya. We're best. We're the right. We're white and straight. And without that, you are minimized and attacked, literally physically attacked.
Yep. And we've mentioned before on this show the multiple instances of these politicians, evil, violent, conservative, savage politicians who, we need to shut down the gays. And guess what we find out later? It's because those politicians are gay themselves. Go back into the archives of this show, going back nearly 10 years. Story after story after story of conservative, evangelical, Christian politicians getting caught with their pants down with somebody of the same sex. And they're the ones that scream the most about
epidemic.
We need to shut down the gay people. Yeah,
exactly.
Just because they hate themselves. That's why.
Yeah, you talk about in a school board the possibility of having a transgender bathroom. You could drag in a dead carcass of an animal and leave it in the hallway easier than to get a transgender bathroom at a high school in West Michigan. Are there any? There are in other parts of the country. There are in California in certain areas. There's one in Washington, D.C. Or not one, there's many in the surrounding suburbs. But we're talking about good old-fashioned misogyny, racism, and homophobia that really hasn't abated. I don't see it's progressing with the people who don't need to have any more understanding about it. Really. They're getting more. It's more elucidation with these revelations about the Indians and schools, et cetera, but the block of meatheads, the sons and daughters of the Confederates, there's no impregnation, there's no, in any way, dent being made with those guys. Not at all. All it's doing is infuriating them more, and they're reacting in violence. How can this country sit here with a past president who said that Putin is a genius? Putin is a genius, the most despised political leader in our lifetime, Darren. And Trump is an ally with him, has fanned him, aggrandized Putin. And we don't, as far as I can tell, the Democratic Party, hell, you should have this plastered on billboards. Go down 131, Donald Trump, quotation marks. He is a genius. He is smart.
He is
Put it
savvy.
on a billboard, America. Put it on a Times Square, my God.
Yeah. And I want to do a callback real quick by reading this final paragraph to this article. Many people considered it egregious that property was destroyed during the walkout. This is not a concern that we share. We choose to focus on the fact that a group of several dozen proto-fascists felt the audacity to attack a demonstration in support of the LGBT plus community on campus. So once again, property damage is violence. No, when you start throwing rocks at peaceful protesters right there and the cops don't do anything about it, right there is violence. That is state-sponsored violence.
Exactly. The backbone of our country, in the Bay, in Boston, was the destruction of a very valuable commodity.
And here's the thing. Here's the thing about it, too, Jack. Guess what? Those people didn't have the guts to do it themselves. Well, to identify themselves is what I'm trying to say. Because guess what they did? They dressed up as Indians, as Native Americans. We'll just let them take the blame for it. So, So even though we threw the tea in the Boston Harbor, we did so pretty much under false pretenses trying to frame Native Americans.
A bad consequence. But we never talk about the destruction of the tea.
Yeah, exactly. I want to get to this story, Jack, as well. One of our big supporters of the show, Pat, sent this to us. This is written by the Associated Press. This is dated March 10th out of Munising, Michigan. I know that town very well. I actually went there for my honeymoon when I was married a lifetime ago. By the way, if you ever get to Munising, go to the dog patch. A lot of food for cheap prices, or at least it was back in 1997. So this story comes out of AP. Michigan prisoners who are trusted to train dogs are getting their pay cut by 42% from $2.65 a day, as in $2.65 a day, down to $1.54 per day. The reason being given, a mistake was discovered by the Michigan Department of Corrections. Unbelievable. The Detroit Free Press reports that the Corrections Department made a mistake by approving the higher pay rate in 2011. So this goes back to Rick Snyder. Men who train dogs at the Alger prison say they must have a good record and complete an 8-week training program to get the job. So what are they training these dogs to do? Are they therapy dogs? Are they police dogs? Wouldn't that be the irony? You have prisoners training police
dogs that attack them.
Yeah, exactly.
That's cleaning your enemy's weapons. But the thing is, the phones that the people have to use to call their family, it's some of the most lecherous rates, charges. And the penal systems have known this for a long time, and there's been no action taken to curb. So, yeah, they may make $1.56, and it's gone in a matter of minutes because they pay 80 cents a minute for a collect call. And that's the only way it works on those phones. So these poor people, but again, who said it? Tocqueville, the French guy? The greatness of a country is recognized by the way it treats its lowest members, prisoners, gays, poor people. And in that area, if that's the criteria, the United States is D-.
Oh, absolutely.
Headed for an E. Headed for a full friggin' E.
Yeah, exactly. And one other article that I really, really want to get to. Again, our friend KJ Miller was discussing with me earlier this week about the right to remote work. And we're going to go at it from a different point here. We have an article. We're not going to be able to get to all of it. This is Joan C. Williams, Rachel M. Korn, and Michaela Boginski writing for Business Insider. This is dated August 4th of 2021. The headline reads, "Don't lose the democratizing effect of remote work." Now, we'll read a little bit of this here. People are calling it the big quit. Employees are leaving workplaces that don't suit their needs anymore, as more and more organizations return to in-person work after more than a year of working remotely. Half of workers now report that they will not return to jobs that do not offer remote work. And I want to stop there real quick because KJ had a good point. You know that going to work requires expense on your part that you don't get compensated for? Like making sure that your car is in running condition, because if your car breaks down, guess what? You can't go to work. So, yeah, this is just something else here. The good news for employees is that 90% of large companies are embracing the hybrid model, which combines on-site work with remote work, according to a recent McKinsey survey of 100 executives at large organizations. The not-so-good news is that mishandling the transition to hybrid work threatens to reinforce social inequalities and jeopardize companies' diversity, equity, and inclusion efforts. So they say that low-level employees are being penalized. So they mention some things. There's also unintended racial effects. Among employees who have been working remote, white employees are 7 times more likely than black employees to report being interested in returning to on-site work. 21% of whites versus 3% of black employees. A big reason is that black workers face a more negative in-person workplace environment. When working from home, 64% reported being better able to manage stress. 50% reported an increase in feelings of belonging at their organization. Can you believe that?
Yeah.
Working from home makes you feel better, a better feeling of belonging there, and lower stress? Why wouldn't you work from home? Really? Continuing, another racial dimension to consider. Although black and Latino employees make up approximately 30% of the labor force, they represent 50% of people who left or lost a job in the past month in order to care for children. That's according to the most recent Census Household Pulse survey. People of color have also faced much more severe consequences of the COVID-19 pandemic, as we've repeatedly have talked about on this show. So here are some of the recommendations that they give to employers. They said follow 5 simple steps to set up a hybrid workplace. So if you own a business or if you run a business, take note of these steps. Step 1, set your target return date. Give employees plenty of notice. They recommend at least 45 days. Number 2, recognize that some workers have a legal right to remote work, especially people who can claim under the Americans with Disabilities Act. Step 3, create a hybrid model policy that works for your organization. Step 4, take action to avoid on-site favoritism. And step 5, rethink meetings, which now, hell, you've got Zoom, you've got Skype. You can do meetings anywhere, anytime with an internet connection. If you have an internet connection, which unfortunately for me being in the sticks, I don't. Not unless I want to pay $100 a month to Elon Musk. Which I guess is another thing we will have to talk about with poverty and, just the lack of broadband high-speed internet out in rural areas.
Yeah, there's answers to this issue. And don't forget, as we kind of wind down here, we're proposing that to eat the rich, you really need to add in some fava beans for a little extra taste. That's an answer. It's disgusting. We need to know where our enemies are at, who is cutting our throats, literally, and go after them.
By the way, my recommendation for eating the rich is Sweet Baby Ray's barbecue sauce. So make sure you pick
Is that good?
Yeah, it's pretty good sauce. Well, Jack, unfortunately, we are out of time. Now I'm hungry. Thank you very much. We'll be back next week. I'm Darren Gibson.
I'm Jack Prince.
For our announcer, please support independent media and the First Amendment.
The stations that carry Southpaws do not necessarily share the opinions expressed on the show. Southpaws is protected by the First Amendment to the U.S. Constitution and is copyrighted by Big D Entertainment. All rights reserved.